You're watching World Championship Wreckage, brought to you by Rivet City Radio and the World Championship Wreckage YouTube page. Today's episode, Eddie Guerrero and Chavo Guerrero Jr. in WCW. And we have a special guest today. It's Mr. Michael Duplessis himself.
I'm full, but I still want more because I'm so high.
Most hood thing you've ever done on the show, and I respect it.
Jay, as always, I love you.
Every week.
I love that he took it so out of context because I am not one who partakes in that vice. Just taking me all out of context, making me look bad on the internet for people. So welcome, everybody, to the second official episode on our YouTube channel for World Championship Wreckage. As always, I am your friendly DadHat wearing Russell fan. And with me, as always, is going to be my bearded brethren, the best person in wrestling to wear a scarf, and that's going to be the Will Gray. And joined with us this week is going to be somebody that I have known since literally day one of me being on Russell Talk over on the TikTok app, and that is going to be our buddy Mike Duplessis. How's it going, guys?
What up, y'all? How y'all
What's up,
doing?
gentlemen?
Thanks for coming on, Mike. We appreciate it. We know that you were very knowledgeable about this subject we're going to talk about tonight, so it's going to be fun.
We'll
I'm hyped
talk
for
about
it.
Eddie.
Yeah, Eddie, anytime you get to talk about Eddie, it's a good night. Most of the time.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it just kind of feels weird. And if I feel like I'm talking in like my low radio voice, it's because I have a new little one and I'm attempting to find a new space to record in. Where I normally record, it will be that little one's bedroom, and trying different places to make sure that I don't wake up either child or, disturb my wife or anything. I'm in a new spot and it's a little bit weird and a little bit, just getting my bearings in this room recording this. But yeah, we got a cool topic to talk about. My favorite version of Eddie Guerrero, hands down, is the 1997 through the foundation of the LWO getting into 1999, that heel Eddie, mullet, long mullet, like it was when he was starting to get a little bit bulkier, but he was still just super lean, just heel height of heel Eddie, which I absolutely freaking loved. And Eddie does a great job of introducing his nephew, Chavo Guerrero Jr., which is cool to kind of find out because they really played up in the storyline. At this point, Chavo has only been wrestling for 2 years. So you've got Eddie, who has been wrestling for forever, with Chavo, who is still
10
brand
years
new.
at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, I should have. Let me get here. It is not here now that we're recording, so never mind. I had some stills. This is why you don't let me produce. This is why Jay normally does, but the stills are not here anymore. But we've still got video, so we'll get that as we go further along into the episode. But let's talk about it for you guys. What do you guys think of when you think about this 97 through 99 heel Eddie? Of course, most people think about Halloween Havoc 97. That's a big one. And I know, Will, you're a very big fan of that match, like most of us. But let's start with you, Will. Heel Eddie Guerrero here in WCW.
I think when you look at this storyline from beginning to end, you and I have been talking about it over the last week. And one of the things to look at about it is one of the last messages I sent you. When you look at his heel turn when it happened, and then you look at how his character builds, then he drops the belt at Havoc, and then it continues to build through 98. This story with Chavo was kind of like, the old analogy, if you fill a jar full of rocks, that was Eddie Guerrero's career. And then the Chavo story was like the sand that pours in on top of it that kind of fills the gaps in between each spot. Because this Eddie Chavo story kind of popped up periodically between 97 and 98. So I think it was kind of a cool thing because Eddie had so many great storylines. World War III, Halloween Havoc, him losing the cruiserweight title, him gaining the U.S. Title. All of these things happened kind of in this year-long stretch of him and Chavo.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And it's such a it's nice to see a storyline that is full of depth that's not revolving around a belt. You didn't need a belt for this. There's no need for a belt.
Yes.
There's belts that come into play, and we'll get to it on the outskirts of it where they're challenging and things for that. But there's no belt needed for the storyline. Michael, what about you? What do you think about when you think about this 1997 through 99 heel Eddie Guerrero run?
So this is actually when I started actually getting into wrestling.
Mhm.
And to me, Eddie was the coolest man in the business at this point. The mullet, the attitude, the I'm better than you. And not just his singles matches, but he had that tag team with Jericho at this point
Yeah,
where they were just badasses and just beating people up. Yeah, this is just to me this and that this and his heel run against Ray is like my two favorite Eddies. I always
I agree with
preferred
that.
Eddie as a heel.
hmm I agree with that. To me, this is what made Eddie Guerrero a main eventer in WCW. This storyline, this time frame, and unfortunately, because of what WCW was, this was as high as he was going to get. There's no after this. He should have been moved into the main event picture, moved into the world title
Yes.
picture, feuding with the likes of Sting and Luger and your Hollywood Hogans and Savages and Nashes, and not just little one-off matches here on Thunder and Nitro. But it's from here, he should have immediately been in that picture. And it just took a little bit of time for him to do that transition over to WWE. And again, things happened personally, but eventually he got there, and we got to see. And it's one of those things where I've never heard Eric Bischoff speak on this, but I would love to know his thoughts about where Eddie got to in WWE and his thoughts on, man, I missed out on that then. Like, what would have happened when you have icons of wrestling with the Savages, the Hogans, the Pipers, even at that time was around, and you could have had Eddie Guerrero in big programs with that. So I'd be curious to know his thoughts on that. But really, it really kind of starts with, I mean, it's a perfect way of moving a wrestler who has been on WCW Saturday Night, made a few sporadic entrances here and there. But this is, to me, might be one of my favorite introductions of a character. And yes, it makes sense because they're family. I mean, it worked oh so well. What are y'all's? Let's start with you, Will. What is your first memory and kind of grasp on Chavo Jr. here?
My early memories of Chavo Jr. are it would have to be around this like mid to late 90s push. I wasn't watching EMLL, CMLL in 90, 91, 92. So like when I first got my exposure to Chavo, it was like a lot of American wrestling fans at the time. And that was after the Lucha invasion, starting around that 94 range and on through that when Bischoff started booking heavy. With the luchadors coming up from AAA and CMLL. And when they came into America, I was like, okay, this is cool. It was very atypical from everything else that was being booked because keeping in mind kind of the things you were saying, we had the Lugers and the Stings and the Hogans and the Nashes. Like we had a ton of big bodied, big meaty men slapping meat. And then you got these little 205-pound luchadors coming in and doing 450s and shooting stars and doing luchador style wrestling. And it was just kind of like, holy shit, where did these guys come from?
Yeah. To me, it was what brought you into the names of WCW, your ex WWE wrestlers on top of Stings. And, those are what got you to turn on the channel. The luchadors, the Japanese wrestlers, that's what got you hooked. because it was so different. And it's funny now, like we'll get to these matches with Chavo and Eddie, like the Great American Bash 98 and Bash at the Beach, and you're seeing these moves, and the commentators and the crowd are going ballistic for these moves. And you look at it now, and it's just like that's a normal match on any episode of Raw, SmackDown, AEW, Dynamite, Dark, whatever. It's every indie show. It's just so weird to see like the crowd just blowing up for literally like, you know, a tope suicida. Like something like that. Like now it's just so passe. Michael, for you, Chavo Jr., when did you first, I know you said this is when you kind of first started, but like first impressions of Chavo Jr., first memory of Chavo Jr.?
It was, when he debuted, and my thing was, because I was such a fan of Eddie, I had done my research even as a kid. So I was like, okay, this is another Guerrero. They're phenomenal. Like, I had friends whose like dads like videotaped or like tape trade. Like I had seen. So when I got
into feel old, man. I tape traded.
I also tape traded.
Yeah, we're old now, Will.
Oh, I've been saying I'm old for a while.
So when I got into it, I had friends' dads like, you got to see this, and I was shown stuff from AAA, CMLL, like. That's actually how I found out about a guy who was actually from Oregon, who tag teamed with Eddie in Mexico, a guy named Art Barr. And the stuff they did in like 91 as in their faction, which is a whole nother story. And
Art Barr gets sprinkled in throughout this feud. He gets talked about with commentator. Like they talk about hair versus hair matches where that tag team lost their hair.
That was back when Eddie spelled his name with a Y.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
because Art's actually from Oregon.
Yeah, it's great. It's a great.
So it was just really cool, especially like I watched the hair versus hair match. And hearing Art Barr's name in that commentary by Mike Tenay, I was like, I like hearing that.
Well, Mike Tenay, like even every time the Brain and Mike Tenay are on screen, I love anytime Bobby the Brain's just like, how do you know this? Like, how do you just know everything? Yeah. But yeah, let's kind of jump into how everything kind of starts. It really kicks off this relationship with the two of them on screen. We're starting in March of 98, the March 12th Thunder to be exact. Eddie's coming out to be interviewed about his upcoming Spring Stampede challenge against Booker T for the TV title. And he literally just blows that off saying, I'm going to win. But he goes into this whole monologue about how, he's done everything he can. He's trying to he's handpicked opponents for Chavo, and Chavo just keeps losing, and he's disgracing the family name. Chavo eventually comes out, and they set up a match for right then and right there, where Eddie says that if he wins, this is an exact quote, Chavo has to do things the way that I say, to who I say, the way that I say. And then Chavo comes back with his challenge and says that if he wins, then Eddie has to go back to doing things with integrity. Because at this point, the whole commentators are building up Eddie as the family is disgraced of him. The family's not talking to him. And what I love about this whole thing is because it's based around family, they're sprinkling in the Mondos, the Hectors, like Chavo Sr. Like they're dropping these names where it's weird because like if it was today's day and age, if that would have happened and I was a kid, I'd be going online right now if we had access then and finding out, okay, who are they talking? Who's Mondo Guerrero? Who's Hector? Who's Chavo Sr.? Not possible right back then, unless you're literally like deep diving in magazines, hopefully finding them, or you're looking and tape trading. So, but it was a cool thing. And again, Will and I have talked about this on several episodes. Again, it starts on Thunder. Not on Nitro, although a lot of this feud does happen on Nitro. Will, what is it again about Thunder? Like, why is Thunder being such a prominent starting point for these feuds that we talked about?
This goes back to, and I'm sure that we will eventually get there, and it might be my topic for this coming week's poll, but the official, unofficial brand split that happened between the NWO and WCW. And that's all the way through. It's either 97 or 98, one of the two. So at this point, look at it like this: WCW was kind of the Thunder brand, and then the NWO was on Nitro. Nitro was big and Broadway, and Thunder was very much still that old wrestling vibe.
There's
So that's
dark.
where you saw a
There's
lot of
old
these
smoky arenas. Yeah.
yeah. So you get a lot of that from this. So when they're bringing in a storyline that has this more grassroots feel to what it was doing, it was more Thunder versus the big lights, big smoke, big pyro that was Nitro at the time. Because this is, we're deep in the Monday Night Wars by middle of 98.
Oh, absolutely.
You know what I mean? So this is where it starts getting tooth and nail for what these guys are doing in the business. And when you the Thunder thing was that it was their wrestling show. That's just the best way to put it. And that's where they wanted their stories to start. It was, one, they were hoping to get views, and two, like I said, this was just a grassroots man versus man, family versus family story. It was kind of made to start here on Thunder.
Oh, absolutely. And I misspoke. It was the interview that he came out for where his challenge Booker T is Uncensored 98, not Spring Stampede. We'll get to Spring Stampede. But we get to Uncensored, and I'm going to play a clip for you guys. And we get Eddie comes out. He challenges Booker T for the World TV title. Chavo comes out, and Eddie forces him to sit at ringside and watch. And after Eddie loses, there's a smirk. Chavo has a smirk. Look, again, your evil deeds, you're getting what you're putting into the world. You're doing bad things, and bad things are coming back to you. So after this, we get this lovely little clip right here, thanks to Jay. It's Eddie being Eddie. Lovely, just basic heel moves. Cool. Offer the other person to go first, and then knock them out from behind. And this was kind of the start of everything. This is kind of the start of okay, you are now going to do what I say. Something as simple as you're coming to watch me at ringside. What I really liked about this storyline, and I touched on it at the very top, is that there's championship opportunities sprinkled around. There's opportunities for both of them where they're challenging Booker T for the TV title, Jericho for the cruiserweight title, things like that. And Mike, what do you think it really? I mean, do you think that a championship would have helped this feud, or do you think what I said earlier about it not really? It didn't need to have a title, but sprinkling in a few.
It did not need to have a title at all.
Mm-hmm.
It did not. Honestly, I think a championship would have diminished this feud.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because that family part was so vital, especially at that time where pro wrestling was so real. They always had the Attitude Era, real life. I think it perfect.
Yeah. This is the height of reality based wrestling. NWO changed that forever. And what's more reality based than fighting with your family? Not the movie, actually fighting with your family. Because everybody can relate to that. It's a relatable thing, whether it be brother, sister, cousin, uncle. They're close in age for being uncle and nephew. I know for me personally, because my uncles are all older, so much older. I remember seeing this and being like, uncle and nephew, even then it just seems weird to say it, but it works on TV. So as the feud kind of continues down the line, we get to the lovely spring breakout that WCW would love to have. We're on Nitro. This is, again, middle of March 98. And we get not the official, but where the shirt initially originated. Eddie comes out. He apologizes to Chavo, but always kind of turns that screw just a little bit. Remember, you're a man of your word. You're a man of honor, and you're going to live up to what you said you were going to do. It's the overall theme throughout the entire feud, is you're going to do what you said you're going to do, right? And he gives him a T-shirt, and it's a typical at the beach, any beach shop, airbrush shirt, and it's the Eddie Guerrero is my favorite wrestler, and then cheat to win on the back, which later eventually becomes an official T-shirt you can buy, which I always wanted and I never got. It's up. There's so many WCW shirts that I wish I had, and that's one of them for Eddie Guerrero. Kind of off of a tangent and everything. Did you guys like the spring breakout? This kind of outdoor venue, Panama City Beach, Florida. Of course, we got the last Nitro there and everything too. But did you guys kind of like this as a break from stadiums and convention centers and different things that WCW was using?
1,000%. This is like hog wild, man, when they went out to Sturgis and stuff. Like, I'm still a sucker for outdoor venues. So when
Same.
AEW did the pre-taped Dynamite on Jericho's cruise ship, when they did like the island show during COVID and stuff, like all of that stuff. I'm a sucker for a cool outdoor show. NWA just did stuff recently in Australia on the beach. Like, I'm here for a cool, like, nice hot weathered outdoor show, and WCW came in clutch a few times with these.
Mm-hmm. Again, another reason why Will and I at times are the same person.
I don't care for. Yeah, I'm a huge fan too. I don't care if it's hot weather, cold weather. Give me a crazy out of nowhere outdoor arena or space that's just not normal.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm a fan. I am much more of a fan even for modern day with WrestleMania. If it's a venue that is the outdoor and the show like WrestleMania 31, where Sting's only WWE appearance at a Mania, where it starts off and it's daytime, and by the time you get to the end of the show, it's dark. Same thing with this past year's. I love that. I love
SummerSlam in
that.
Nashville.
Oh, yeah.
When I got to go to SummerSlam in Nissan Stadium, and it was the show started pre-show at 6:00 and it's sweltering hot. And then by the end of the night, you're almost chilly because the sun's down and it's a totally different vibe when you're in an outdoor stadium show for a wrestling event.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I was watching WrestleMania 19 the other day at Safeco.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just so great. And I wish they would bring back a Mania or a bigger pay-per-view back to like either where the Mariners play or where the Seahawks play, because those stadiums would be amazing for a Big Four pay-per-view.
Yeah. Oh, without a doubt. But yeah, this was cool. This was different. This is the infamous spring breakout where you get Nash, doing a cannonball into the pool, which was used on, I feel like, every WCW versus WWE Monday Night War clip that episode they did. They always showed Nash jumping in the pool, which I thought was funny. But we keep going with the feud here, and I will say this, and I made a joke to our buddy from our episode last week, Husky Rhodes, about how from now on, when I'm picking topics for the show, I am picking everything before 1998, so I do not have to hop back and forth between Nitro and Thunder, because on Peacock it's a pain in the butt to, like, unless you're on your actual laptop where you can have a tab and another tab, and one can be just Nitro, one can be just Thunder. That's the only way to do it. If you're doing it on your TV on a Fire Stick or Roku or whatever, or your tablet, pain in the butt to bounce back and forth. So I know I won't stick by that rule, but anything if we pick something prior to 98, you're gonna know Justin doesn't want to jump between Nitro and Thunder, because it's like, okay, and there's missing dates too, so I would go back to Thunder and it's like, oh, clearly there must have been a Braves game on that night, and so there's no Thunder episode that week, and it's just funny if you're going back and look at it. We talked about them including the family and everything, and even in the commentary throughout this feud, we get this. Eddie's talking about how Chavo is disgracing the family. Grandma's not happy. Grandma can't be allowed in her club anymore because of her loser of a grandson, and Mondo got kicked out of his low riders club because his nephew is a loser. And it's matches and things and Eddie is doing things that help build him as a heel, but it's things that also are trying to help build this new wrestler pretty much wrestler on TV for people to get to know, but also build a baby face. You get Eddie, who is going into matches, who fakes a knee injury against like Scott Norton to make the smaller Eddie or smaller Chavo go against Scott Norton. So again, heel tactic, baby face growth for that. Same thing of Chavo was scheduled to have a TV title challenge against Booker T on, I believe, a night on a Thunder, and Eddie was supposed to wrestle Chris Benoit in the opening match. Eddie and Chavo come out the very opening match of the show. Eddie goes, "I'm going to take your title opportunity. You're going to wrestle Chris Benoit." So again, it's beautiful what they do, because you have this unit of a heel and a baby face together, and they're growing exponentially. Can that work today, guys? Like, Will, let's start with you. Could that work? And what would it take to make it work if you think it can?
I may not be the best person to start with on this one, because I find it hard to believe, outside of a handful of people, that in 2023 people really know the difference between being a heel and being a baby face.
That's true.
I jokingly say that, I'm being passive aggressive about it. I think that in order for this to work, you would need a story built around this style or this vibe or this aesthetic, and one of which that could do it would have been the Dom Ray stuff. Like, and there's still room for it. When Dom starts to make this face turn, it could be Ray trying to coach him along, like reverse of this, instead of Eddie being like, "Hey, Chavo, you got to lie, cheat, and steal to get over and to be the champ." This is Ray convincing Dom to come back to his side, and every week is like pulling Dom back to the light. Like, "Hey, don't go back over there." You know what I mean? So like, there are ways to pull it off in today's wrestling. And I think the Guerreros could be a perfect example of this, or the Mysterios rather, could be the perfect example of how we could do it in 2023, because you're going to need that family aesthetic, I think, no matter what.
Michael, what about you?
Yeah. No, I think you need something like a family or like a best friend aesthetic.
Montez Ford
Kinda
and
like
Dawkins,
the Kevin Owens.
somebody like that.
Yeah, Dawkins, or like the Steen, Sami Zayn situation.
Mm-hmm. So Will had the mind-blowing moment last week. Can I maybe throw out my
with the Kenny Omega thing?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So
that clip is amazing.
Yes, it is. Here's my kind of mind-blowing thing that I think about like this to answer my own question, which is funny as I glance over at Raw, and there's Dominic Mysterio. Talk about, we're in the Eddie world, and there's Dominic Mysterio on my TV. But this has worked in 2023 and 2022 and 2021. It's exactly what the bloodline is. You have Roman, who is a heel. Yes, he has become a fan favorite heel and everything, but you had the growth of a Jey Uso as a baby face that they wanted to believe in, and he became a main event Jey Uso, and then that kind of changed, and he did go full on heel, and you got Sammy, which is funny because he was a heel who started turning into it. So I think we did get it over the last couple of years, and it can be done. But just like we all kind of agreed upon, it has to have that kind of family dynamic or friendship between the two that is more than just two random people that maybe feuded or were a tag team once. It has to be that history behind it.
That's it. That's the one. That's this week. So we can cut Jay right here. We're good.
Jay went sleepy by, so it's usually
that's our TikTok clip for the week. DadHat, you got yours. That was the TikTok clip for the week. Perfect. Yeah. Nailed it. That's exactly it.
Sweet. So as we continue on with the storyline, to kind of break it down, because there's a lot of different matches and everything, and I did not know I did not remember this that well when I chose this topic for the poll, that this feud was almost freaking year long. And that's a lot of Nitros and Raws to go back and watch. But to kind of sum it up, you get a lot of matches with Ultimo Dragon, which is a great watch at all times. You get a lot of matches with a young Booker T, a young Chris Jericho, some sprinkling in of Stevie Ray and a few others, Scott Norton, big men versus little guys. But through all of this, Eddie is constantly watching Chavo. Chavo loses, slapping Chavo around, and it gets to Chavo. And Chavo, what happens when you're poked and poked and poked and poked and poked and poked? Eventually, you snap. And that's what happens with Chavo. And
Yes,
Chavo, his snap, he gets a little cuckoo in the cabeza. He gets a little cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, if you will. So much to the fact that he is my favorite part. Like, we will get to Pepe, and I love Pepe. But the fact, like, I forgot all about this, but as soon as I heard him say it, I was transported back to 1998. Him calling Uncle Eddie Little Trooper. I lost my mind. I forgot totally about it. You can do it,
Little Trooper is the greatest thing in the world.
Like, I did not remember that at all. And then when I heard it, I was like, yes. It was literally like I was back in my home as a 12-year-old, 13-year-old watching this. Like, it was great. It was great. What do you guys remember about this snap and Chavo finally just not being able to take it any longer, being pushed around by his uncle?
Mike, you tee off on this one first.
It is the tiny little things, the little troopers, the Pepes, the crazy antics, and it leads into like my favorite Chavo, which is that 99-2000 like MIA Chavo.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a big fan of WCW in 2000. So like Lieutenant Loco was just phenomenal to me.
Yeah.
So it's like you get that preview of what he's gonna end up becoming.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's great. It's definitely an evolution for him, and I think that we got to see the kind of the white meat baby face, the one trying to, like, he's always losing and everything. And this just let us see that other side of that character. It showed him he can have a range. He can be like, and I will say, I've watched a lot of wrestling in my life. I don't know anybody that can play crazy like Chavo Guerrero.
My favorite thing about this is if you look at the feud,
not the comedic crazy. He has
no. He's
crazy.
just
he had that realistic, like, losing his mind crazy. If you look at the 97 feud into the 98 feud, and I say 97 because you said it stretches almost a year, and I sent you a picture of it when I was doing my notes earlier. Their first match in WCW against each other that wasn't a tag team match was July 14th of 97. The hair versus hair match was July 12th of 98. True. So literally this stretched for so long. When we tell you, like, Mike brought it up with the tag team matches with Jericho and Malenko and those guys, like, this was such a vital piece throughout this entire puzzle. And if you look at what it did for both men character wise, it helped show you that Eddie was ready to be a main event push, and it showed you that Chavo was a star. And then you look simultaneously in 2004, leading up to their story at the Royal Rumble. That story was about showing that Eddie was ready to win a world title and Chavo was ready to be in the main event.
Yeah.
So it was two very different rivalries at two very different points in their career. But this family tie stretched so much further. Go all the way back to 90, all the way through 2004. You're looking at a 14-year story now between these two men. This is much bigger. This is WCW. But if you look at the Chavo and Eddie story, man, like, we're talking like 10 plus years of a story between these men, weaving in and out of tag teams and hating each other and singles runs and titles. Like, this was a long story.
Yeah, it was. I know when Los Guerreros got together in WWE, I just remember being like, let me buckle up. I've seen this movie before. This is just a sequel, and with the money and this is a low budget film that is now mainstream and going to be a blockbuster because it's got the machine and the money behind it. Not saying WCW didn't have money. They did. They had Ted Turner and a bunch of money, but different.
The money was going to other places.
The money was going in the right places, and you had two veterans at this point, not just a veteran and a
very green rookie who just came across, just came up.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, Los Guerreros in WWE was great, and you see stuff in Los Guerreros that you see back in WCW. Like they definitely pay homage to that. But let me play a couple of these clips here. So of course we get a match at the Great American Bash in 1998, which is one of my favorite WCW pay-per-views of all time. The 98 Great American Bash to me is so loaded because you get this, which is finally you get these two getting hands on each other. You get the final match of the best of 7 that we talked about with Benoit and Booker T. We get the Booker T after he wins that best of 7 with Fit Finlay. You get Sting recently turned to the red and black NWO against the Giant in the main event for the tag team titles. It's a loaded card for Great American Bash. One of the first loaded Great American Bashes in a long time, which is such a historical pay-per-view for WCW. But then after that, not only do we get that, we get a hair versus hair match. But before we get there, let me show you a couple clips that Jay put together for us. So early on the feud, we had Eddie being kind of a teacher to Chavo.
That way I could show my nephew and teach him a lesson on how it's done.
So, I mean, just great promo after great promo. But then we do get to Bash at the Beach, which Bash at the Beach is especially you're looking the mid-90s, so many big moments happened at Bash at the Beach going into 2000. NWO arrived, Malone and Rodman, the last appearance of Hulk Hogan in WCW with the whole Jeff Jarrett, Vince Russo scandal. So there's a lot that happens in Bash at the Beach. But we get a hair versus hair match. And because Michael is an encyclopedia of wrestling, Michael, how important is the hair versus hair match in terms of luchador wrestling and down in Mexico and like that whole lineage? They speak about it in commentary, but talk about it a little bit here for us. I know you're an encyclopedia.
It is very, very important. It is a match that goes back to the early days of Lucha Libre in the 1920s and 30s. Guys like El Hijo del Santo and Blue Demon and, Eddie's father and, Rey Mysterio Sr. We're talking guys who are legends in the Lucha Libre. They like the hair versus hair and the hair versus mask matches are the most important matches in Lucha Libre history because the hair and the mask are the most important thing to a Lucha Libre.
Mm-hmm. And we nowadays, because to kind of steal a quote from them boys, the Briscoes, in WWE and mainstream, you've got to be aesthetically pleasing. To steal a line from the late great Jay Briscoe, not a lot of options really to do hair versus hair matches today. Like, if we were gonna have that match today, who would you put in that match?
If we were gonna do a hair versus hair versus mask, honestly, fantasy booking wise, I said that the build for Eddie and Ray should be a hair versus mask match, and put Dom's. Eddie, Dom and Ray. Sorry, yeah,
I agree with that.
Put Dom's mullet against Ray's mask. You know what I mean? Because that screams old school Lucha Libre. Because like what Mike was saying, man, if you go back far enough, if you didn't wrestle in a mask, then you had long hair, and they were one and the same. You either had one or possibly both, and they were equally as important because if you lost that match and you had to shave your head, that was like Samson and Delilah level shit. Like, you were losing your strong, you were debonair, you were that, that hot Latino dude that could walk around and get anybody they wanted. And then that moment, cutting your hair was like that kick in the dick you'd never recover from.
You look like a 12-year-old boy again.
Yeah, so in today's world, it would be perfect for a Ray Dom feud, the build up and finish there. To see it with some of the guys that have longer hair, like a Santos Escobar, he's got built in because he's got the little man bun thing, so he's got a built-in story there. Andrade would have been a great pick for it. All of the guys that have the link to the Lucha Libre influence that could bring that tradition into America with an American wrestler. So put a Chris Jericho and an Andrade in a hair versus hair match, because he's also got a lion heart, stuff like that. So I would want to find those connecting pieces to make it mean something in the story.
Yeah, and which all makes perfect sense. The only person that if we didn't pay homage to that, the only person I would want to throw in is freaking Austin Theory, so we can shave off that Amish thing growing on his face.
Also a great idea, just to punish Theory for looking like Theory.
Yeah, like that. Whatever he is growing, I'm like, what is happening on your face? But so we get to the Great American Bash, and we get to Eddie and Chavo, and Chavo came out on top of the Great American Bash and looked like a star doing it. And in this case, with the hair versus hair, we get a little bit of the crazy that plays off with Chavo, because Chavo challenges Stevie Ray to a match first, which Eddie goes off on a tangent and a whole promo about, like that he's literally just going to be able to frog splash him and be done because Stevie Ray is going to do all the heavy lifting for him. Well, that match lasts all about 2 seconds because the bell rings, Stevie Ray shakes Chavo's hand, and Chavo taps to the handshake, which also makes Stevie Ray very mad.
I love that.
It's great.
I love that so much.
It shows the cuckoo and everything, and he's like, "Oh, we get to wrestle now. Come on, little trooper, get in the ring." And so we get this match, and it's aggressive and it's hard hitting, and you really get an aggressive Chavo for between these two matches. First time you're really seeing an aggressive Chavo, but Eddie comes out on top. But the craziness continues, and so I've got these two clips here because it's not the typical Edge versus Kurt Angle where they shaved his head, Vince McMahon and everything. In this case, Chavo decides, he's cuckoo. He'll do it himself.
Watch this. You like that
one? And then we got this.
Jr. shaving his own head.
Just doing it himself. And Eddie does not want anything to do with the craziness. And
he almost looks terrified.
Yeah, he does.
He almost like, oh shit, I pushed this guy way too far. Because this whole time he's pushing Chavo's buttons. It's almost like, if I use a very 2023 term, Eddie was gaslighting the fuck out of Chavo this entire time.
Perfect.
And at the very end of it, Chavo just he's like, fine, whatever. You want me to shave my head so you'll love me? I'll fucking do it. He finally just snaps. And that's the way it comes across, is like Chavo just finally has enough and is like, whatever it takes to make Uncle Eddie happy, I guess.
I'm a big pop culture nerd. Like it's the theater person in me, because that's what I do outside of my regular job and wrestling. I'm an actor, I'm a director, and so I'm a big pop culture nerd. I love watching good TV shows and movies. I love watching bad TV shows and bad movies. So I'm a big How I Met Your Mother fan. So like as soon as I rewatched this hair and he shaved his own head, I'm like, there's Marshall at his wedding and and he's just looking like shaved center of his head, and he's just like, it's fine. It's fine. It's good. It's good. Like the craziness in his face is what Chavo is, and I'm like,
Meredith Palmer does it in The Office. There's an episode where everybody gets lice in the office, and Meredith Palmer's in the bathroom, and she's just shaving this shit off, and she's just like, "Oh yeah, baby!" And she walks in there just razor shaved, and I was like, it's kind of what it made me think of too. I immediately went to The Office in that moment for that reason, because I was just like, this is wild. And then you and I have talked about it before, like some of this stuff I may not have watched since I saw it in 1997.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And some of these obscure, I don't ever remember the random 3/12/98 Thunder. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So going back and rewatching these matches is almost like watching them for the first time, because who the fuck remembers random March episodes of a 1990s wrestling program? Then you rewatch it and you're like, holy shit, this was really good.
Yeah.
Like, WCW is primo a lot of times. You get outside of the Hogans and all of that stuff, and you just look at these style of matches and stories, and like WCW is fire in 96, 97, 98.
I still stand by. If you could have had the undercard and gotten rid of the Hogans, yes, you needed some main event players. Keep the one, like, keep Sting, who was there from the beginning, the Flair, maybe make him eventually a part-timer and things, but WCW could still be around today if it wasn't for the politicking. And I know how you feel about Kevin Nash getting the book and the pencil. We know. That's one day I know you're going to be your topic.
Oh, you feel the same way, Will?
I in my video when we first started, we gave
that.
our big four, and I said the biggest mistake WCW ever made was giving Kevin Nash the book. I was like, that was the biggest mistake.
Facts.
It will be. Yeah,
That
he took
is-
Ray's
that-
mask, he beat
like,
Goldberg Street, like all the bullshit yucky things he did as a booker. Kevin Nash was a fantastic worker. Diesel was a great champion. The NWO is one of the most polarizing groups in wrestling history. I'm not talking about his in-ring work. As a booker and promoter, he was super sub-fucking par.
Yeah.
I'm not even a big fan of his in-ring work. I am not the biggest Nash fan at all. So
it depends.
Actually,
I pick and choose my Nash matches where I'm like, that's
I wrote an article for the Sportster that was talking about how bad Kevin Nash was as a booker.
Yeah.
Like, that's how passionate I was about it, because I was like, these guys, the decisions he made were nonsensical. The finger poke of doom. You know what I mean? Like, booking decisions that people are like, well, Russo did this or Cornette did that. And I'm like, yeah, but Kevin Nash but they didn't do the finger poke of doom. They didn't do all of the other yucky things Kevin Nash did as a booker.
Oh, very, very true. Again, that'll be an episode. I know it's coming.
As I derail the show now.
No, you're fine. You're fine. So eventually, this kind of leads, we get through these matches, and we're going to talk about Pepe, because if you watch the Nitro after this hair versus hair match, Steve Mongo McMichael and Eddie are having a match, and mid-match, the crowd goes ballistic because Pepe has already been introduced by this point, but he comes to the ring, and that freaking stick horse is over.
It's like Matilda for the British Bulldogs. Their fucking little bulldog puppy they would take to the ring. This stick horse was more over than both Guerreros at this point.
I'm going to show you a clip. The two most over things in wrestling that had nothing ever to do with wrestling. Are you ready for this?
Oh.
The wiggle and the stick horse. Two most over things in wrestling that had nothing to do with wrestling. What do you guys remember about the introduction of Pepe? And he is like the introduction of a prop to the storyline and the craziness.
I watch DCW. So I'm used to people having pet chairs and pet kendo sticks. You know what I mean? Like I saw some of that.
I was about to say, I've still got a head over.
Yeah.
So nothing is shocking.
When I go back and I see this, though, what makes me happy about it is this wasn't a kendo stick or a mannequin head. You know what I mean? This was just a stick horse that had no business being there.
Mm-hmm.
This is almost on par with. I'll give it credit. Pepe the stick horse and head as being inanimate objects that have nothing to do with the sport. I would say they're pretty close to equal, even though they didn't get the run they needed to with Pepe, but I would say that Pepe was equally as over for these few weeks as Head was the entire time Al Snow had her.
Yeah. And Chavo just made that freaking stick horse. He believed in that stick horse. He put everything he had into that stick horse. Like
selling and facials and interaction, all of it, just because.
I will say though, I think wrestling was so hot at this time, you could have got anything over very easily because we're talking about a time where Perry Saturn got over by being in a dress.
Hey, sorry, Mike. There is no ill speaking moments of Perry Saturn on this podcast.
No,
Perry
I love
Saturn
Perry,
is a saint.
but like, no, I love Perry. I'm a huge Perry fan, but like, we're talking about like he got a dress over. He got dresses over. Like it's wrestling was just that hot. You could have gotten it. I could have got rolled out there in my wheelchair and got over and done nothing.
Yeah,
You're probably not wrong.
Yeah, not at this time. This is the time frame where my wife, even who knows nothing or cares anything about wrestling, can tell you stuff that happened in wrestling during this time period because that's all she heard the boys in middle school and high school talk about was pro wrestling.
Well, if you grew up in that mid '90s Attitude Era, Monday Night Wars push, everything was either NWO or Suck It, anyways. You know what I mean? Like 100%.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I was in elementary school, and I remember boys getting suspended for saying "suck it" all the time.
Yep.
So to kind of wrap up as we're getting towards the end of this feud and everything, there's some stuff behind the scenes. Eddie Guerrero goes away, the whole infamous, cup of coffee, Eddie Guerrero, Eric Bischoff confrontation and everything. Well, eventually Eddie Guerrero comes back and that's made into a storyline, and Eddie forms, which is now back on WWE television, the LWO, which I remember loving it at the time and thinking it's awesome that they're playing off the NWO and the look with the flag for Mexico. Thought it was cool and everything. Again, Eddie being the established and building up these luchadors that you see week to week, but giving them more to do than just coming out and being the workhorses. It gave them a storyline. Even if they weren't the best on the mic or really fluent in English, it helped move them up more in their positioning. And Chavo gets denied, membership into the LWO. Eddie doesn't allow it. The LWO, guys, it's back in WWE right now, which I love that they're paying homage to it. It's a very, again, Triple H being in charge of creative, being a fan of the history, and Triple H loved WCW. He loved the classic and what they did. Thoughts on the LWO from back in the day and thoughts on it coming back and being back on television today? Michael, let's start with you.
I love the LWO as a kid. That has a lot to do with I was really into, even though never understood it, really into AAA and CMLL as a kid, really into the Lucha Libre style. So seeing those guys like a Damien 666 or an El Dandy, and Parka, or Parka, Spider, guys who were stars in Mexico, finally get that push that Bischoff has been holding those guys down. So it was really cool. And the LWO now, I like it. I wish they would have done something with way back, was that mid 2000s or mid 2010s when they had all those Lucha Libres when they brought the cruiserweights back.
Yeah. Oh, I might have lost Mike.
Oh,
technical difficulties, folks. He'll be back. If not, Will and I will finish up business. But Will, before we get into the housekeeping stuff of the show. Oh, he's back. You're good. You're here.
So what I'm saying, I wish they would have done it in the mid 2010s when they had the bigger large pool of the Spanish talent when they brought back the cruiserweight title.
Mm-hmm.
But I do love that they did bring it back.
Yeah,
because I am a fan.
Yeah. I think when we all saw it, especially if you're like Will and I's age or you're familiar with it, it's just that's something that I'm sure there are a lot of casual fans or they saw that and they're just like, what is this? And having to have people explain it to them. As soon as I saw it, I'm like, that's awesome. That's just the most obscure WCW thing to bring back. The only thing that would be a little bit more crazier for them to bring back is the Triple Cage from Ready to Rumble that we've talked about, or the Chamber of Horrors for Halloween Havoc. Like those are the only things that more obscure I felt like they could do. Will, what about for you?
I've made multiple videos about them. I want them to bring that Triple Cage back.
It's a logistical nightmare, man. When I was on the Ready to Rumble episode, I talked about it. Like the workers who have talked about that match, like how terrible it was. Like maneuvering on the cage was a nightmare. How dangerous it was taking bumps. Like it was. I'm not never say never in pro wrestling. Yeah, but that would definitely be a GCW, XPW. Like that would be something those guys would try to pull off before I think we'll see a Triple Cage in AEW, WWE again.
Yeah, I agree with that. What about for you, Will? LWO back in the day, thoughts, fond memories, and then thoughts on Triple H putting it into storylines today?
It's the perfect callback to the old booking, and you're right. Triple H loves old school wrestling, and as much as it hurts my old man heart to say it now, the mid 90s is starting to get real close to being old school wrestling.
Yeah, it is.
So I think about it like we're at that point. This wasn't like the NWO where we saw so many versions of it in and out, and WWE had one and it was a callback, and then like it wasn't like that. We haven't seen them again since almost, as far as I can. This is the second time they've used this gimmick since the original LWO. So like this was the perfect timing for it, because Legado del Fantasma, like everything about that group of guys with Escobar and all of his boys, Zelina's perfect mouthpiece for him. She's also a moderate worker in the ring. She was Queen Zelina for a little bit. She shows that she can, somewhat get over. So I think it's the perfect core group. If, like what Mike was saying, if they didn't do it in that early 2000s, mid 2000s push when they did bring in the cruiserweights, this is the perfect time to do it, especially with what would appear for Ray to be on his way out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, folks, that's going to bring our talk of the Uncle Eddie and Chavo episode to a close. Before we get out of here, we got some business to take care of. First of all, Michael, thank you for joining us. I'm sure this is not the last time you'll be on with us, as much as we love interacting with you and having you on. Definitely, if you will take your time, shout out, letting the people know where they can find you.
MJ Duplessis 1992 on TikTok, and that's pretty much all I'm at. I have no Facebook or Twitter or any. I have my Facebook, don't put that out there, but I don't have Twitter or anything. So just my TikTok.
He is a wrestling encyclopedia, folks. Like, go give him a follow over on TikTok. The knowledge that is retained in his brain for pro wrestling. Good. If there was a wrestling Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, he would just go right through it. He'd go right up the entire ladder. So for us here with World Championship Wreckage, World Championship Wreckage kind of everywhere. Twitter is WC Wreckage Pod. We are now on Instagram, and it's World_Championship_Wreckage. We have a TikTok, World Championship Wreckage. Again, follow us everywhere, because you get to be part of the show. You get to be the ones to pick what we talk about, which Will and I will get into here in a second. But Will, Rivet City Radio, Bot Spots and Share Shots, what's going on over with you guys this week?
Well, first off, DadHat, MJ, I love you guys. It's always a pleasure, especially DadHat. This is one of my favorite shows of the week that I do now. I love getting into this old history side of it. So when we started this every week over week, it's always one of my favorites. I am the Will Gray. I am your co-host here on WCW, and I'm also the host and lead writer of Botch Bots and Share Shots. If you check my social media links at the Will Gray, go to my link tree. It has all of my stuff to find me on Rivet City Radio for Botch Bots and Share Shots and for WCW.
Perfect. Anything big going on this week for you guys?
We've got some really cool interviews coming up. We've got Big Steve Mack. I've got Tony Leyenda, both independent superstars out of the Atlantic Northeast area. We've got trivia on Thursday with some cool people coming through. And then, honestly, like, it kind of starts balancing back out. We've got you on Sunday for the month in review on Botch Bots and Share Shots. It's going to be the first time we're dropping a month in review. It's going to be kind of a look back at what April was for us. And we're going to kind of talk about our favorite and least favorite things. So we've got some cool stuff coming down the pipes over on Botch Bots and Share Shots.
Cool. So next week our episode. This is what I get for gloating last week. Will's choice of the WCW managers just destroyed my option of the Big Papa Pump here. So will be leading the discussion next week. So I get kind of not a week off. I'll still be researching and watching stuff, but not as much as I did the last couple of weeks. But talking about WCW managers, Will, what are some highlights we get to look forward to next week?
I think the big thing that I'm going to want to nail home is to think about WCW is historically known for the what ifs, because you think about at one point they had Sting and Mick Foley and Undertaker and, Stone Cold Steve Austin as Stunning Steve Austin, all of these guys under one umbrella. And then you think about the time at this same point, they had Jim Cornette and Bobby the Brain Heenan and Paul Heyman and Sherry and all of these other amazing managers as well, on top of all these amazing talents. And you just think about what if WCW had been able to utilize them the way WWF utilizes their talent today, what they could have done with it if they realized it. Because when you look at it, all the best managers of all time comes off of that list. Most of the time it's your Heenans, your Heymans, your Cornettes, and then you start getting into some of the other ones, Captain Lou Albano and stuff like that. And a lot of these guys, like, believe it or not, all had boots in WCW at one point or another.
As long as you touch on Sister Sherry and Colonel Robert Parker, we're good. So I mentioned
they definitely missed the mark with James Mitchell.
Yes, James Mitchell is another great one.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We talked about him with Canyon last week.
Yeah, we did.
We talked about how vital he was.
Mm-hmm. So, guys, you guys get to be part of the show. You guys get to pick what we choose. I put the poll out usually after this. Once the episode has posted on YouTube, the very next that same day or the next day, I post the next poll. But we're gonna make our choices right here. Will, since you won, I'll let you go first this time. For the next poll, what do you want to throw out there?
I'm going to do the 1998 unofficial brand split. I'm going to go ahead and run with it and talk about what happened building up into 98 and why during 98 every pay-per-view ran by World Championship Wrestling was a WCW NWO branded event, and what led up to that, what happened during that year, and how they faded away from it on the brand split that never was.
Very, very cool. That's a cool one to go into. Part of me wants that to win, just so we can kind of dive deep. And again, if we don't, I'm sure we will eventually get to that one, because that is going to be a good episode. So mine's going to be a little bit different, something we haven't done yet. At first, I thought about, but I was like, we don't have time to, especially with the one I want to do. I was like, we're going to watch 4 pay-per-views and go over them. No, we're not going to do that. But we're going to. But you gave me the idea for this in a text message. We are going to talk about a match that tried to be a launching point for WCW, but also became the bastardization of one of my favorite things ever in wrestling, which is the Royal Rumble. We're going to talk about World War III.
Yes,
we're going to talk
a million people in 3
I
rings
love
for no
World War
reason.
III.
Yes,
Okay. All right. I love the World War III pay-per-view.
We're going to talk about not all 4 pay-per-views, but just the World War III matches. If that one wins, we'll talk about how it was meant to be. The first one was for a World Heavyweight Championship. How for the first time or the second time in Randy Savage's career, he wins the world title as part of some type of gimmick match, a tournament in WWE, a battle royal here in WCW. And then from there, it was supposed to be a launching point, and what it did for. You had Scott Hall, who finally got a chance to go against for a world title. Didn't work out for him. We also get to go into Kevin Nash winning that, ending Goldberg's streak. So there's a lot of layers into World War III. So if we win, that's just a little bit. We'll talk about that. So we've got the unofficial 98 brand split versus World War III for episode 8 coming up. So that poll will be up as soon as this is aired on YouTube. But guys, it has been a pleasure as always. For my buddy Mike Duplessis, for my friend Will Gray, I'm your friendly neighborhood DadHat wearing wrestling fan. And we're going to end the show the way we always end it. Wise words from the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes.
Yeah, baby, I got one more thing to say. Your gas tank is full. Your dipstick is in. Your windows washed. Y'all come back and see me again.